She loved her dog more than us. And for good reason. The will states, "All my property goes to Bonnie. If the dog dies, I want to be buried with her." We're left empty-handed while a mutt is now a millionaire. I always knew my mother-in-law was eccentric, but I never imagined it would come to this. 3 months ago, she passed away from a sudden heart attack, and yesterday we finally sat down with her lawyer to read the will. My husband had been pacing around the house for weeks, calculating how we'd pay off our credit card debt with his inheritance. We'd been struggling financially ever since I lost my job last year, and frankly, we were counting on this money to get back on our feet. The woman lived in a gorgeous Victorian house in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in town, drove a luxury car that was newer than anything we'd ever owned, and had more jewelry than a department store. She never worked a day after her husband died 20 years ago, living comfortably off his life insurance and investments. Meanwhile, we've been eating ramen noodles and generic cereal for months, watching our savings account dwindle to nothing. But apparently none of that mattered. According to the will, every single cent, every piece of property, every investment account goes to Bonnie, her golden retriever. Not just the money either. The house, the car, the jewelry, even her collection of antique china that I'd always admired. All of it belongs to a dog who spends most of her day sleeping on a velvet cushion and getting hand-fed premium dog treats. The lawyer explained that she'd set up a trust fund for Bonnie's care, with detailed instructions about her diet, exercise routine, and even which veterinarian to use. She'd appointed her neighbor as the trustee, someone who barely knew our family but had been walking Bonnie every Tuesday for the past 5 years. This neighbor now has control over millions of dollars, all dedicated to keeping one spoiled dog comfortable. My husband just sat there in stunned silence while I felt my face burning with embarrassment and rage. We've been planning to use the inheritance to finally buy our own house instead of renting this cramped apartment where the heating barely works and the neighbors upstairs sound like they're tap dancing at 3 in the morning. We talked about maybe having kids once we were financially stable, but that dream seems even more impossible now. The worst part is remembering all those years of fake smiles and forced politeness. Every holiday dinner where she'd criticize my cooking while slipping Bonnie scraps of prime rib under the table. Every birthday where she'd buy expensive gifts for the dog but give us discount store candles. Every family gathering where she'd talk about Bonnie's achievements like she was a human child, showing off tricks and bragging about how smart and loyal she was. I used to think it was just harmless old lady behavior, the way some people get overly attached to their pets when they're lonely. But now I realize she was completely serious about considering that dog more family than us. The will even includes a clause stating that if anyone contests it or tries to challenge Bonnie's inheritance, they'll be permanently banned from visiting the dog or having any contact with the trustee. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since we learned about the will and things have gotten so much worse. I decided to do some digging into the legal aspects of this situation, spending hours at the public library researching pet inheritance laws. Turns out, what my mother-in-law did is completely legal in our state, and there's basically nothing we can do about it. But that's not even the most infuriating part. I drove by the house yesterday and there's already a construction crew there. Apparently, the trustee is using the inheritance money to build a custom dog run in the backyard, complete with climate control and a small swimming pool. Meanwhile, we're behind on rent again and I had to sell my wedding ring just to buy groceries this week. My husband has been a complete mess since this all started. He keeps saying he should have seen the signs, should have tried harder to maintain a relationship with his mother. But honestly, what were we supposed to do? The woman never showed any interest in having a real relationship with us. She'd rather spend her evenings brushing Bonnie's fur and teaching her new tricks than having a conversation with her own son. I also found out from a neighbor that she'd been telling people around town for months that her family didn't really care about her, that we only visited when we needed something. Which is completely unfair because we invited her to every major event, every holiday, every birthday celebration. She was the one who usually declined, saying she couldn't leave Bonnie alone for that long. The neighbor who's now the trustee called my husband last week to let him know that Bonnie was doing well and adjusting to her new routine. She mentioned that the dog has a daily massage therapist now and gets organic, chef-prepared meals delivered twice a day. I wanted to scream. Here we are, considering a second job at a gas station just to make ends meet, while a dog is living better than most people. I've been having trouble sleeping, laying awake at night thinking about all the opportunities we're losing. We can't afford to fix our car, which means I can't expand my job search beyond walking distance. We can't save up for a security deposit on a better apartment. We can't even afford to go out for dinner once in a while, something we used to do every Friday night before everything fell apart. My sister thinks we should hire a lawyer and try to contest the will anyway, but we can't afford legal fees, and from what I've read, we'd almost certainly lose. Pet inheritance cases are notoriously difficult to challenge, especially when the person was clearly of sound mind when they made the decision. And my mother-in-law was definitely sharp until the very end, unfortunately. Update 2. A month has passed and I never thought I'd be writing this, but something completely unexpected happened. The trustee called us 3 days ago with shocking news. Bonnie died in her sleep. Apparently she'd been sick for a while, but the veterinarians couldn't figure out what was wrong. She just gradually stopped eating and became lethargic, and one morning the trustee found her peacefully passed away on her expensive orthopedic dog bed. Now here's where it gets really weird. Remember that clause in the will about wanting to be buried with Bonnie if the dog died? Well, it turns out that wasn't just a sentimental statement. My mother-in-law had made very specific legal arrangements for this exact scenario. Her body was supposed to be exhumed and reburied in a pet cemetery alongside Bonnie in matching custom caskets. But here's the thing that changes everything. The will also stated that if the dog died and the burial arrangement couldn't be carried out for any reason, the entire estate would go to charity. The trustee discovered that the pet cemetery my mother-in-law had chosen was shut down by the city last year due to environmental violations. The backup cemetery she'd listed was at full capacity and not accepting new burials. The lawyer spent weeks trying to find an alternative that would satisfy the will's requirements, but my mother-in-law had been incredibly specific about the type of cemetery, the location, and even the orientation of the graves. None of the available options met all her criteria, which means legally, the burial arrangement couldn't be carried out as specified. So now the entire estate is being liquidated and the money is going to an animal welfare organization that my mother-in-law had listed as the beneficiary in this scenario. We're still not getting any inheritance, but there's something oddly satisfying about knowing that the money will actually help animals in need rather than spoiling one already privileged pet. The trustee seemed genuinely relieved to be done with the whole situation. She admitted that managing Bonnie's care had become a full-time job and she'd been feeling guilty about spending so much money on one dog when there were so many animals in shelters that needed help. She said Bonnie had been depressed and anxious since my mother-in-law's death anyway, barely eating the gourmet meals and showing no interest in the expensive toys and activities. I found myself feeling genuinely sad about Bonnie's death, which surprised me. Despite all my resentment about the inheritance situation, she was still a living creature who had lost her beloved owner and never really understood what was happening. In a way, we were both casualties of my mother-in-law's complicated relationship with love and family. My husband and I have started looking at this whole experience differently now. Instead of focusing on what we didn't get, we're trying to figure out how to build our own financial security without depending on anyone else. I've been taking online courses to improve my job skills, and he's been picking up extra work on weekends. It's been hard, but there's something empowering about knowing we're creating our own path forward. We also had some long conversations about what kind of people we want to be when we're older. Neither of us wants to end up isolated and bitter, replacing human relationships with material possessions or even beloved pets. We've started reaching out more to friends we'd lost touch with, and we're making an effort to be more present in our community. Final update. It's been 6 months since this whole saga began, and I wanted to share how everything turned out because some of you have been messaging me asking for updates. First, the practical stuff. We're doing better financially than we have in years, but not because of any inheritance. About 2 months after Bonnie died, I landed a really good job with a company that had been impressed by the new skills I developed during those online courses. The pay is significantly better than what I was making before, and they even offered to help with continuing education. My husband also found steady work with a small business owner who appreciated his reliability and work ethic. We're finally able to save money again, and we put a deposit down on a much nicer apartment in a better neighborhood. It's not the house we dreamed of buying with inheritance money, but it's ours and we're earning it ourselves. But the bigger change has been in how we think about family and relationships. We started volunteering at the animal shelter that received the donation from my mother-in-law's estate. It's been incredible to see how much good that money has done. They've been able to expand their facilities, hire more staff, and help hundreds of animals find homes. Working there has given me a new perspective on my mother-in-law's attachment to Bonnie. I've met so many people who found deep comfort and companionship with their pets, especially after losing human family members. Maybe her relationship with that dog wasn't as crazy as I'd thought. Maybe it was just her way of coping with loneliness and grief after losing her husband. We've also been much more intentional about staying connected with the family we do have. My sister and I talk every week now, and we've started having regular family dinners with my parents. We realized that we'd been so focused on what my mother-in-law owed us that we'd neglected the relationships that were actually healthy and supportive. The strangest part of this whole experience is that I actually feel grateful now. Not for the inheritance situation itself, but for what it taught us about self-reliance and what really matters. We'd gotten so caught up in counting on money that wasn't even ours yet that we'd stopped focusing on building our own lives. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd gotten that inheritance. Would we have used it wisely, or would we have just become dependent on money we didn't earn? Would we have learned to communicate better and work as a team, or would financial security have made us complacent? I'll never know the answers to those questions, but I do know that we're stronger people now than we were before this all started. We've learned that we can handle disappointment, adapt to unexpected circumstances, and create our own version of success. The house my mother-in-law lived in was eventually sold, and the new owners turned it into a bed and breakfast. Sometimes I drive by and see guests sitting on the front porch, enjoying the beautiful garden and the peaceful neighborhood. It makes me happy to know that the place is bringing joy to people again, instead of being a monument to isolation and regret. As for Bonnie, she's buried in a small pet cemetery about an hour outside of town. The trustee had a simple headstone made with her name and dates. My mother-in-law's body is still in the original cemetery where she was first buried. Somehow it seems fitting that they're not together in the end. They each found peace in their own way. I never imagined that losing an inheritance I never actually had would turn out to be one of the best things that ever happened to us. But here we are, happier and more secure than we've been in years, with a clearer sense of who we are and what we want from life. Sometimes the universe has a funny way of giving you exactly what you need, even when it's not what you thought you wanted.